Thanks to everybody for joining, and welcome to our session, Level Up, Improving K-8 Math Outcomes Using Digital Games. And today we're going to talk all about how to use digital games in your classroom to help support K-8 math outcomes. So one of the best things about games is that they drive so many unique behaviors from us. They challenge us. They can be really rewarding. And digital games have come so far in the last little while. And thanks to everybody who's posted where they're from in the chat. I'd like to ask a follow-up question. What are some of the favorite games that you used in school if you used digital games or analog games? Would love to know the ones that stick out in your mind. A lot of times these games stick with us. I see Prodigy and Splash Learn already. Thank you, Yvonne. That's awesome. Wow, this is really cool. Hey, Q, nice to see you, man. Freckle, Bingo, Scrabble, awesome. So many incredible games. And I want you to think about the games and the emotions that they evoke from you, how these games made you feel. And typically it's going to be that really positive feeling like, wow, I really accomplished something, made me feel really good. And that's what we want to do, is kind of blend those worlds together. Still see those answers coming in. Thank you so much for that. I'll introduce myself. My name is Dr. Josh Pryor. I'm the Educational Advocacy Director here at Prodigy Education. Before I joined Prodigy, I was a classroom teacher, and after that, an assistant principal in Palm Beach County, Florida. So shout out to anybody who's joining us from there. At that point, I decided to join Prodigy Education because of the love that I had for digital game-based learning. I can't even tell you the number of hours I spent in the computer lab at school playing games like Tetris and Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing and Cross Country Canada and all kinds of learning games in the 90s that were available, and they really hooked me. And it made me think of how we could impact the lives of millions of learners with my work in education, and that's what drew me into Prodigy. And I've been here for 4 years now, and it's so neat to be a part of an organization that really works hard to help every student in the world love learning. And we at Prodigy are really honored to be the sponsors of today's webinar. Students love learning with Prodigy because it makes practice fun. It makes math practice fun. We believe that learning should be as fun as playing a video game. We're really proud that last year more than 50 million students and nearly 900,000 teachers use Prodigy Math at zero cost. And I'm going to talk more about how that works later. It's because of our unique freemium business model, but teachers can use Prodigy at absolutely no cost to them or their schools or districts. More on that later. Now I'm thrilled to get to introduce Chloe and Andre. We'll start with Chloe. Chloe is a classroom teacher who leads a second grade team at Somerset Academy in Port St. Lucie, Florida. She has been teaching for 7 years, and she's originally from Miami. She has been recognized as the Teacher of the Year for her school campus, and she really leans into games in her classroom. She's got a Pokemon theme in her classroom, and she's a global ambassador for Prodigy Education. Outside of the classroom, she founded the Future Teachers of America Club at her school, and in the summer, she's the summer camp director. So Chloe Cancio-Bello Pena, welcome to this panel. What excites you about digital game-based learning?
Thank you, Josh. What a nice intro. I can't really pinpoint one thing that got me excited about game-based learning. If I had to ballpark it, it was probably when I was a child myself. Like you said, I was part of my school gifted program, and we used to play games like Oregon Trail, Where in the World is Cameron, San Diego, Freddy the Fish, and I loved it. I didn't realize I was learning, and I just wanted more all the time. When that flipped and I became a teacher, and I saw that kids still love video games. Like, that hasn't changed over the years. It became a passion of mine and something that I feel really strongly about incorporating into my classroom.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing more from you. And I'll now introduce Dr. Andre R. Denham. He is an associate professor of instructional technology in the Department of Educational Leadership, Policy, and Technology Studies at the University of Alabama. He is also the associate dean for graduate academic affairs in the Graduate School. He is a noted international scholar on games, both analog and digital. He really focuses on the design and development of games, the integration of game-based learning in the mathematics classroom, and the identification of effective methods for increasing digital game-based learning and game-based learning knowledge for math teachers. He's presented over 35 conference papers. He's given over 20 invited talks, keynotes, and workshops. So, Dr. Denham, Andre, welcome to this panel. Thank you for being here. What excites you about game-based learning that led you to choose this as your primary research focus in your career path?
It came from my experience as a math teacher before I moved into higher ed, and just watching how engaged my students were, especially students that might have traditionally struggled in math. But once I got really deep into it, I think there's like five things that I feel are that make games great, and a good game is a great example of a great learning environment. And so, Nicola Witten, she's the author of a book I use in one of my courses, and she has these five things that I always borrow this from her: is that games are playful. They allow students to not actually to interact with material that might be complex in a playful manner. Games allow you to squeeze a lot of practice into a short amount of time, and especially when it comes into math, practice is huge. So the more practice you can get, the better. I talked about engagement already. She mentions that already as well. And great games are scaffolded very well. It allows learners to do things that they actually aren't really able to do yet. And then if you design it well, you can kind of fade that scaffolding, and eventually they're just standing on their own. And finally, games are fantastic at providing feedback. You always know how you're doing in a game at any moment. We might not be, it's kind of tough for us to do that in the classroom, right? Ask the student, well, what's your grade right now? They're like, I don't know. But if you're to play the game, it's like, are you doing well in this game? Yes or no. It's really quick. Games are really great at that. And all those are elements of great learning environments. That's what's always attracted me to games and using them in the classroom.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have your expertise here with the group. We're going to do a quick poll right now, and let's get to know you. What is your role in education? You should see it pop up in your screen in just a second. Curious to see the mix of folks that we have with us. We'll give it a quick 30 seconds or so. Seeing a really good mix. Teachers very much in the lead, which is awesome. We see some instructional coaches, some administrators, ed specialists. This is great. School psychologists. Wow. What a really awesome blend. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here. School board director,
Oh,
teacher educator.
No.
Phenomenal. All right, we'll go ahead and close the poll, and we'll go ahead and keep on rolling. Here's a quick look at the agenda, kind of the overview of what we're going to talk about in this professional development session today. Chloe is going to start us off with the landscape of digital game-based learning, DGBL, what it has looked like recently. Then Andre is going to talk us through some of the foundational research in speaking about the impact of digital game-based learning. How do we know whether or not games help students learn? After that, I'm going to talk us through the EPICS framework. This is a brand new, never before seen framework that's designed to help teachers choose and integrate games from end to end. After that, Andre and Chloe are going to talk about integrating digital game-based learning in the K-8 classroom. From there, I'll talk about Prodigy and how we can help you in your K-8 math classroom and what our program looks like if you're not familiar with it. And then we'll make sure we save some time for Q&A. So with that being said, I will turn things over to Chloe to start talking about the landscape of digital game-based learning.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so let's get started by anchoring on what the landscape of DGBL has been like over the past few years. I'll also mention here that DGBL stands for Digital Game-Based Learning. So, why do we like the idea of blending games and math in the K-8 classroom? Many students love having an opportunity to play games, whether that's analog or digital. Now, that happens at home, at school, in the classroom, or pretty much anywhere. You don't even need a research study to tell you that. You can pretty much ask just about any child. Now, Research has shown that students as young as second graders can show signs of math anxiety that negatively impact their achievement in math. This is something that is unfortunate, but it's true. And here in the United States, second graders are 7 or 8 years old. That's extremely young to have them already starting to worry about their performance in math. With digital games becoming more and more popular, math-based digital games provide us with a really unique opportunity to blend joy and learning for these kids. By exposing students to digital math games at a young age, we're giving them the opportunity to feel like, yeah, you know what? I can do this, and I can have fun doing it. That positive attitude can pave the way for a long-term love of math that can be life-changing for students, especially now that STEM is such a big thing in today's society. So, what research do we have on the impact of digital game-based learning? So, digital game-based learning has certainly been around for a long time. Some of the games mentioned earlier, like Oregon Trail, has been around since, I believe it came out in 1971 or something around then. So, this isn't something that's brand new. But let's rewind and go to about 2014 when digital game-based learning was rapidly growing in popularity. The Joan Gaines Coons Center at Sesame Workshop commissioned a study to better understand just how much digital games were being used in classrooms. They conducted a survey and got responses from nearly 700 teachers who were teaching kindergarten through 8th grade. What they found out was remarkable. They found out that nearly 3/4 of K-8 teachers reported using digital games for instruction. And it wasn't like they were using it once and then never again. No, 4 to 5 teachers were using digital games at least once a month. Importantly, the research also uncovered why teachers were using these video games in their classrooms. They discovered that it was because video games helped them assess student knowledge and provided students with standards-based practice. But digital games could also help them to derive achievement for the kids to be happy about what they're doing. In fact, teachers who used games more often reported greater improvement in their studies' core and supplemental skills. What Takayuchi and Vala found was mirrored in a survey of teachers done by Blackboard and Project Tomorrow that was published in 2018. They discovered that in 2012, 30% of teachers reported using digital games in their classroom at least monthly. When they asked that very same question only 5 years later, they found that it was 62% of teachers that were using digital games in their classroom at least once per month. That's a huge jump, and that helps us confirm that yes, teachers just like me were using digital games in their classroom before the pandemic even hit. Then the pandemic hit, and teachers turned to digital games in a huge way to engage students during that time of remote learning. Teachers needed access to high-quality tools that could keep students engaged in their learning while they were forced to be outside of the normal four walls of your classroom. Many teachers, like me, were already using digital games, and we were able to quickly adapt and let students and parents know that digital games were a great way to help keep students engaged and give them the standards-aligned practice that they needed. However, with the world shifting so quickly, the use and demand for digital game-based learning tools skyrocketed to levels that never had been seen before. So in addition to teachers who were already using it, there were so many more teachers that were new to the idea and started to really jump in and embrace the idea of this because it was what we needed to do. Articles like ones from the Washington Post highlighted how much this trend was. We also saw scholars calling for the use of video games in schools on a more consistent basis. Dr. Andre Thomas is a video game designer and scholar at Texas A&M. He wrote an article citing 5 reasons that video games should be used more widely in school. According to Dr. Thomas, these 5 reasons were: video games can help students stay in STEM, they provide experimental learning, the players learn from failure, students stay engaged in the content, and games make complex learning more fun. I can especially relate to the experience of players learning from failure. Both children, and if we're being honest, adults as well, don't like to fail. However, when you're playing video games, it provides you a safe place to do that. It allows students to fail and start over. Watching students grasp the concept that failure makes you have to start over and adopt a different approach of doing things is a valuable skill that can be applied in just about all real life situations. Today, digital game-based learning continues to grow in popularity and have headlines after headlines. In some ways, it feels like it's evolved because we're using digital games in our classrooms in a much more targeted way. We even call it gaming for impact, really making use of the screen time in the classroom to help us drive positive academic and attitudinal outcomes. In May of this year, Education Weekly posted an article that dove deep into a research study that showed the positive impact that digital games can have on learning and on student motivation. I won't go into the details right now. Andre is going to do that in the next session. However, I think this really helps to demonstrate that digital game-based learning still gets and deserves attention because of the impact that it can have on student learning and motivation. In my classroom, I've seen students that are years behind what their other classmates are, where they should be. And they don't feel like they're going to catch up. They don't understand what we're doing in class. They think it's pointless. However, presented with games, they can start to catch up, and then they start winning tournaments in my classroom, and the confidence that they gain in themselves, both with learning and just in general, is so amazing that you can't even like describe it. I've also seen students' willingness to learn outside of school grow with this. They don't want to stop playing at 3:30 when the bell rings. They want to go home because they're having fun doing it. Now I want to do a quick poll. Which one is more important to you? Engagement, that students enjoy digital game-based learning in class, or academic improvement, that the tools improve academic performance? I see it's going back and forth, back and forth.
Oh, no, it's even.
Oh, now it's not.
Now it's not.
It was close for a second there. It's not that far off. I think
No.
for me, it's a little bit of both. I mean, if they're not engaged, they're not gonna improve academically, and if it doesn't have that academic improvement, then the engagement isn't as important. So now I'm going to turn things over to Andre to talk more about what research has shown us in terms of the positive impact that digital game-based learning can have on students.
Thanks so much, Chloe. So in this section, I'm going to share some findings for some research studies that help anchor our position that digital game-based learning can have a positive impact on student learning. I will say that when I started in this field, that was kind of still up in the air. So I started really working on this in around 2008. Um, and we were still kind of battling whether games were good for learning. But I think from the research I'm going to show you now, we've kind of put that question to rest. So I'm going to start with one of my studies. It was a paper that was um, published in 2018. It talks about using digital games as an advanced organizer. In this study, we had three conditions. We had one where students, they all played the same game. They played that game. Some students played it before instruction. Some students played it during instruction, and some students played the game after instruction. So everyone got the same lesson in it. We controlled it for as much variables as possible. And what was surprising was that all students showed improvement from pre to post. We had a test they took at the beginning and the end. But those who played the game before instruction had a even showed a significant improvement in their learning compared to the other two groups of students. And so what we theorize and hypothesize is that, and this was a math game, I should say. This was done to teach a math concept. Was that gameplay before instruction can help students ground their learning. They can use the game basically as an advanced organizer. And that's why the title of the study is that way. Now, I do want to give a caveat that says that we talk about games, but I just want to make sure it's something that I always say to my students is that all games aren't good games. Just like all lesson plans aren't going to work. It's important to understand that all games aren't good games, and by that I mean they're not all good for learning. So, and Josh is going to get into this some more later when he talks about that ethics framework. I think that's a good way to kind of understand how to find games that work. Well, I'm going to tell you about another study while we're here. This one was talk about supporting conceptual understanding of the associative and distributive property. And this is a great example of this. This is actually from my dissertation, and that's why I have this slide up. So I had two conditions of the game. One version of it was two editions of the same game. One was an intrinsic and an extrinsic version, and I'll be real quick with what that means. One that it was the game. What I was trying to have the game teach was mapped to the game mechanics, and one it was not mapped to the game mechanics. And game mechanics are what you use to power the game. And what we found was that the ones where the learning content was mapped to the game mechanics, those students did better than the other students. But I asked, it was 111 fourth and fifth graders. And what I found out, though, we also asked them how they thought about the game. Everyone hated the game. So they learned, but the game design was terrible. And so that's why I said all games aren't good games. And so the game design is crucial with that. But I want to talk to you about a couple other studies which I think are good to hit this. So there's one is using meta-analyses, and so meta-analyses are done when researchers want to look at a large scale to see the impact of a particular intervention. And so what they do is they go through a series of processes where they narrow down and they have an exclusion criteria. They get a set of studies that they look and they conduct statistical analysis to see the impact of that intervention on whatever it is. In this case, it's learning. And so we have this one here. This is a good example from Bars et al. From 2013. And it kind of sees that this is kind of what a review does. So in a meta-analysis, you might run a search on Google Scholar or some database, and it usually gives you a whole big range of studies, and you kind of whittle it down until you get the studies that match your criteria. And so we're going to talk about a couple of those meta-analyses that have been done by games on learning. So the first one is from 2016, and it was done by Doug Clark. He's a faculty member. I think he was at Vanderbilt. I think he might be in the school in Canada, actually, believe it or not, now. And so they did a large-scale meta-analysis, and they had a total of 69 studies, and they found that in that digital games significantly enhanced student learning relative to non-game conditions. So they looked at studies where students, it was basically business as usual in the classroom versus students using a digital game. And they found that digital games outperformed non-game conditions. And this is significant for a couple of reasons, but most notably because it demonstrates that games really do have an impact on learning. And it covered ranges from pre-K in all the way to the end of university in terms of the populations that they looked at in the study. So that shows that the effects are not just limited to elementary or to a certain grade, but all the way to university. So another one we talked about earlier was done by Bars, and this one was done in 2013. And what it did was they did a few. This is more recently, so I should say meta-analysis. What happens is if it's published in 2016, it's basically a snapshot in time, right? Because they're looking at studies in that range. So he might have went from 2000 to 2015, published in 2016. This is a more recent study, which means they were able to include more recent studies. And one key difference is that this meta-analysis just focused on grades 6 through 8. And the findings affirmed what Clark found in his meta-analysis as well, in that digital game-based learning led to improved learning outcomes when compared to traditional learning instructional methods. Traditional instructional methods, my apologies. But all of these two have just looked at games in general. What about a meta-analysis that just looked in terms of math outcomes? Well, we've got one for you there too. In 2019, Atovic, Novak, and Thompson did a study just on math achievements on meta-analysis and digital games. And what they found is that there's a significant positive relationship between the use of video games to help students in math and academic outcomes. And so this is showing over and over again that in general, games help students learn, but specifically that we get those same effects in mathematics. So now I'm going to turn things over to Josh, and he's going to talk about that EPIC frameworks that we have been working on and that I mentioned earlier.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. And for those of you who have not started using digital games in your classroom, it can be really daunting to figure out where to even begin. So I am curious, would love to see in the chat, yes, if you use digital games already, or no, if you haven't used digital games in your classroom just yet. It'd be neat to see the mix of folks we have here. But the EPICS framework is meant to really help you understand how to work through from the very beginning. And let's go ahead and dive in. And I'm so glad to see a mix of yeses and nos. That's awesome. So that's why the EPICS framework was built. It can be hard to know, again, where to even start. And this cycle walks you through that. So starting with step one at the top right, it's about evaluating digital games effectively. The games you might want to use in your classroom, what should you be looking at, and kind of walking through that. And we'll walk through all these steps in just a moment. Step two is planning for integration. So once you've chosen the game or games you want to use in your classroom, really thinking ahead about how you want to integrate them into your classroom activities. Then step three is investing in data review. And that's one of the most powerful pieces of digital game-based learning, or having students play, is that there's a lot of data on the back end, a lot of learning data that you can take advantage of. So first is making the time to review it, knowing it's there. Step four is coaching for success. So taking that data and really putting it into action to help support your students and close gaps. Then you've got step five, which is socializing data among key stakeholders, the ecosystem around the learner and including the learner. So let's dive into each of these steps. And this is designed, again, to make it easy for you. So the first one is evaluating effectively. So number one is finding the right fit for your students. I've had the benefit of speaking with so many teachers over time, and they've said that, yes, they can choose a game, but if the students really hate it or don't like it, they'll play because you're telling them to, but it's not going to be a well-rounded digital game-based learning experience. You want a game that's going to be engaging for them and really blends that engagement with learning. So play a lot of games, take a look around, log in, learn how they work, learn how they look, find something that's compelling for them. Then check to make sure the game you're choosing is going to meet your needs, right? Is it going to easily integrate into your classroom? Will it work in a technology station? Is it going to require lots of attention from you? And in that case, you've got to watch what they're playing and talk with them constantly, or is it more something they can work on independently or in stations? And then if you found a game that, looks like they're going to enjoy it, it meets your needs, it's going to fit into your classroom, it's got good data for you, it's time to evaluate it. Starting with standards alignment. So many companies will say, yes, my game is aligned with state standards, and that's great, but it's important to really dig in. As you're playing, look at the content you're seeing and ask yourself, does it match what I would expect to see for my grade level and my curriculum? And you're going to know best in that case. Second is looking at efficacy research, understanding what developers are publishing in terms of, do games support learning outcomes? Do they support attitudinal outcomes? Are there success stories that seem to match the use case that you would have for the digital game in your classroom? And then another area to evaluate is privacy and security, really taking a look to make sure the privacy policy is in place and is going to meet your needs. Look for certifications by companies like iKeepSafe and others to help you know that you're looking into a game that is going to be the right one for your students. And for each of these steps, we've got some supporting resources. In this case, the University of Michigan published a framework called the Triple E framework. And this can definitely help you in step one. It doesn't replace it altogether, but it's a great component or a piece that you can use as you're going through step one and really evaluating the games that you may want to integrate. Now in step two, you've chosen the game or games you want to use. You're going to dive a little bit deeper. You want to figure out really the ins and outs of that tool and how it works for you. So that's participating in any professional development that the developer offers. Huge insider secret is checking YouTube for videos and tutorials from other educators who say, hey, this is how I use it. This is the best way to find what you need. You can definitely find that in a quick and easy way in many cases. Second is to consider the use cases you're going to implement. So is this going to be fun on Friday afternoons? Is this going to be built into your math workshop or your station rotation? How are you going to use it? Have a plan for that. Third here is going to be communicating with key stakeholders. So that includes like school administration, making sure they're aware of the tools that you're planning on using. The teachers on your grade level and above and below your grade level, they may benefit from using the same tool that you're using. And parents and guardians, you really want to get them engaged as well. They're going to be your allies for learning at home in many cases. When you're talking about digital game-based learning, this is positive screen time, and it can replace time spent doing other things that are not learning centric. So that communication part is key. And then last is get your students ready for playful learning. Put it up on the projector, show them the game, walk them through it, get them excited, and then give them their login credentials and let them play and explore. And once you've done that, you'll be ready to hit the ground running. And the supporting resource here is the P-card model, and Andre is going to talk a little bit about this a little bit later. He's published a study around this, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it right now, but it's definitely a resource to keep in mind. All right, step 3 is investing in data review. So number 1 is finding time. And I've been a classroom teacher. I have been a school administrator. I understand that there is not much time. What I did as a teacher was block a planning period a week to look at the data, not just for the games that I was using, but for the assessments and other things so I could plan the week ahead. So working to find that time. Second is making sure you know the types of data that are available to you from the gameplay. So great games are going to have that data for you in a teacher portal. Know which exact data you want to take a look at so you're not spending time looking at all kinds of different things. Third is looking at the data class-wide, checking to see if the patterns you're seeing in terms of achievement match the assessments that you've used already. Where are they the same? Where do they differ? And then last is looking at data student by student. It's a great way to know where students are learning, where their gaps are, and it can help you planning not just for the use in games, but in class in general. And again, as I mentioned, YouTube is a great way to get a sense of the reports and what's available for you in terms of data. All right, now moving on to Coach for Success. So this is where you're creating a plan to take the data that you've gotten from that gameplay and using it to inform your decisions for how you're planning your week ahead, how you're going to help support students and close those academic gaps. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. There are various tactics that can include whole group instruction. If you see that, the whole class just really hasn't understood something that you've taught, it can be small groups. So you could have students play and see how they're performing. And then for those who are really struggling, pull that group closer to your desk and do some small group intervention. And then third is celebrating success and student growth. Students are going to work really hard in digital games. In many cases, they'll earn things like points or badges, or there'll be leaderboards. You want to really celebrate that growth with them. Now, a great resource here, a book I like to recommend is Driven by Data 2.0. It's by Paul Bambrick Santoyo, and he really built the book around, 2 key questions. One is, are students learning? Yes or no? And 2 is, if no, what are we going to do about it? And he talks about creating a culture where data drives decisions and helps support decisions and making that the norm. I like that he talks about how to thoughtfully use assessments, both formal and informal, to support you. So highly recommend this as something to be familiar with as you're working through the EPICS framework. And then we get to step 5, socializing data among key stakeholders. Students, of course, are on the list. You want to communicate with them. It's really cool to leverage the game and say, hey, the time you've been spending on this? Here's where you have been growing academically. Here's what you've learned. And that's always a positive discussion. You can also show where their gaps are. Hey, you really need to work on this. Let's spend some time together. Second is, in my experience, both as a teacher and administrator, parents and guardians really want data and information. They want to know how their children are doing. Games can give them a window into that. A lot of times they have their own logins or portals that they can leverage. So make sure that they know that that's there. It's also helpful in parent-teacher meetings. Third would be teacher colleagues and support staff. So if you've got a team of teachers you're working with, you can share the gaps that your class has because maybe their classes have the same or similar gaps. But I'm also thinking about support staff here. Things like educators who are working with students on IEPs or who have 504 plans. They need all the data they can get. And so this can be another avenue to help them see and share how their students are growing. And then last is school administration. It can be helpful for you to communicate with administrators why you're targeting certain areas and you've got the data to back it up. It can be during your evaluation cycle, showing that you're innovative, that you're leveraging different instructional strategies. So really taking that data and sharing it with the world. And then kind of stepping all the way back to the EPICS framework as a whole, step one is really like also step 6. Let's say the school year has ended like it has now. You sort of pause and you think, hey, okay, what went really well this year with the digital games I used? And what didn't go well? And what would I do differently? Do I even want to use the same games? Right? And then you go right back into the cycle for thinking about what you're going to use, how you're going to use it, etc. So stay tuned for more on the EPICS framework. This is the first time it has been shared out.
It was so cool. That's something that I've been watching you create it on here, and it's just so awesome to have heard you. But in this section, I'm going to talk about ways that I've integrated digital games into my classroom. Every classroom is different, but these are some of the ways that I find work really well in the years that I've been teaching. So one thing that everyone knows that teachers need to do, and we need to do very often, is to assess our students. So digital game base can actually really help with that in many ways. So first is using them as a digital worksheet. Students need practice, practice, practice. They say like, practice makes perfect. Digital games can provide this practice without you having to run to the copy machine. They can do it at home. They can do it at school. You don't have to remember, oh, well, did this student struggle with this? What does this student need? Because the games will do that for you. And that makes differentiation so the kids get exactly what they need so much easier. You can also use them as a formative assessment. So let's say you've started teaching a new concept and you want to see which students are understanding it and which ones just aren't really grasping it yet. You can create an in-game assignment of just 10 questions, give them about 15 minutes to complete it, and answer the questions while they play. While they're doing that, you'll see the reports populate in real time for most of these digital games, and you know exactly who needs help and what. So you'll know, okay, well, this student, maybe they don't need any help. I don't need to worry about making sure, but these couple students, let me pull them later because they're not quite getting it. You can also use it as a summative assessment. I've before made my end of year or end of unit test fun by turning it into a game. The students love it. And for me, it means I don't have to sit there and grade things later on paper because the game already grades it for me. And that saves me so much time. And because the students like it, I find that they tend to do a little bit better than on the plain paper and pencil test. You can also use it as like an exit ticket. 5 questions. Some of these games have it already for you. Some of them you can put it in, like create your own questions. And once they finish it, you give it to them. They're ready for their next part of the day. It's super useful when it comes to planning because with that data, I can look and see, okay, tomorrow, do I really need to go over something with the whole class? Is it just a group of kids that need a little bit more on that? Or what do I need to know for the next day? Now, I can't speak for every single class, but in my experience, every class I've taught has been extremely competitive. They like to win. It doesn't matter if there's a prize or not a prize, they just want to win. So I find a fun way to change things up is to use digital games for competitions. One of the ones that are really popular in my classroom is Beat the Teacher. So this challenge engages students in friendly competition and fosters their enthusiasm for learning. I tend to do it during my recess periods when we have inside recess, and I give my students this opportunity to challenge me. They go nuts every time. Oh, Miss C, I'm going to beat you this time. There's no way you're going to win. I got it. I know you beat me last time. They just get really excited. And then we have a few different digital games that we use in our classroom. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? That's fine. You think you can beat me? I'll let you choose. You can pick the game you're going to play. And they love it. So one of the options that we use is Prodigy, where they can face me one-on-one. So I'll log into my account that I've created and the other student will get into theirs. The rest of the class will like to cheer us on and play. The thing with Prodigy in particular is it does adapt. So my questions when I'm playing are much, much harder than my second graders. So them even seeing me do those questions, the ones that aren't challenging me, they love it. They're Missy, what are you doing? What kind of math? What is this? And they get even more into it. And then sometimes they win, and that's just such a like ego boost for them. And I love that. There's also other games like Blue Kid, Gimkit, Kahoot. I think I saw people talking about Kahoot earlier that they play, and that's like a whole class competition that pits the students against each other simultaneously with me also going against them. So after they engage in this collective rivalry, I allow the winners to choose the game mode for future games. This helps them stay actively involved because they want to pick, they want to play the game that's their favorite, that they think they're going to have an advantage over the other students. I also like these programs because I can customize the questions to align with the topics that we're actually studying in class. So, like, sometimes I'll do it where it's at their pace, whatever level they're at, and sometimes I'll make it a little bit more focused on whatever we're currently doing. This instills a sense of accomplishment and delight as students experience the satisfaction of outperforming me in a friendly academic competition. I also started something in my whole school called March Madness, just like sports that has become a huge sensation. Every year in March, we set a tournament where students compete against each other. I make a huge deal about it in my classroom. And this year, my principal actually chimed in and gave each classroom two gift cards so that the two winners of the games were able to get $10 gift cards. And we'd never done that before, so they were shocked and so excited. So last year we used iReady, but I've used Prodigy and Math Excel in the past for it. They randomly pair, so you'd randomly pair students up, not by level, nothing, just I pick from a hat names, and they'll go against each other each week. And depending on what digital game you're using, winning could be time spent, lessons passed, most questions correct, just really depending on what you're using. And on Monday, I would announce, okay, this is who won, this is who they're going against the next week until we finished. And they really liked them. We continue until there's one student left and they're the winner and they get their little prize and they really love it. So one of the things that my school mandates every teacher use is center rotations. Now, when I joined my school, I was very hesitant because I had never seen them used before in the schools I was in. And as I was a student, I don't remember ever using them. But the more research I did into it, the more amazing I realized that they were. So not only do centers provide an opportunity for teachers to tailor instruction to meet the diverse needs of our students, but they fit in really well with adding digital game-based learning into the classroom. It allows our students to have a set time of the day every day where they can use technology. So I do my centers in my classroom as must do, may do, where they have a set amount of things they have to do for the week. And then when they're done, they can pick the things from the may do. So our school mandates certain programs. They do that. Once they hit their minutes or correct questions, then they're allowed to pick from the other digital game based that I have kids that will finish all of the must do on Monday, or they'll go home and do more of that program at home so that when they come into school Tuesday, they're able to play their games for the rest of the week that they really want and challenge their friends while they're. So this is a great incentive to get their classwork done so that they can play these games. And depending on what website you're having them play on, you get almost immediate feedback. So when you're meeting with them, you'll know exactly like, okay, well, I just looked over, this student got this wrong. Now when they come to my table for centers, that's what I should really focus on with them. So, an increasing number of schools are adopting a homework free approach, and my own school made this transition 2 years ago. Because of this, a lot of parents ask me, like, how can my student continue learning? I understand that, like, why we don't do homework, but I really want something for them to do at home so they're not home just being a little couch potato or something. So, in the past, I used to prepare weekly packets that cover the topics we had covered in class, but they weren't personalized. It was okay, this is a packet of what we covered. Here you go. Everyone gets the same packet. So some students would feel unchallenged because they were above that level, and then other ones would find the work too difficult and really struggle at home, which would affect their confidence. This also took a lot of time out of my planning period, and I know most teachers can probably agree that we don't really have enough time as is. So it was just a frustrating experience for students, for me, and just kind of all around. With the digital game-based learning, I now can just suggest parents, okay, well, this website, your students know how to get in. It's tailored for them. And the students will engage in meaningful learning experience just for their needs. And that is so important. It makes them want to learn as well. So it's not even like, oh, a packet of papers where I give them and they're like, oh, this is boring. I don't feel like doing this. They're having fun. And anyone who has kids probably can tell you that if they're having fun, they're going to want to do it for longer. It's so heartening when I have parents reach out to me in like our PTCs or through email telling me about how much their students enjoy these learning think games that they probably would have never known of before. As mentioned previously, digital game-based learning helps teachers target their students' strengths and weaknesses. Our next use case is using the data from Prodigy Math to help inform math intervention. As you can see, there's a model on the screen. It's showing the different tiers for RTI, and which is response to intervention, how these things can help. So digital games can be a great way to get data-based insight on students' math knowledge as part of Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. You can set up assignments for students to complete and then target plan interventions and instructions in their small groups or even one-on-one based on the gaps that you see from this. All you have to do is have them play. They play the game, you review their data, and then you can create these lessons based on what you see. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and it's also a lot quicker. So it's not like, okay, I have this stack of papers, I need to get through it, and then I can do it. No, it's immediate. You have the data, you can act on it right away. I also use data from these games and PTCs with my principals. We do meetings once a month, like going over what they need and how they can support us. And with this information, this data, we make, okay, this is what we need. This is where they're missing. How do we fill that in, like as a school, as a group? So now, Dr. Andre.
So we're going to kind of pick up the pace to make sure that we can get some times to questions. So I'm just going to talk about some of my attempts to help integrate games in the classroom. And thanks, Chloe. That was great practical advice on how you've done it as well. And so the main thing that's driving what I've been working on is this statement right here, is that teachers aren't going to implement game-based learning until they're confident in their ability to do so. And so I think that there are basically two ways to do this. You have to provide professional learning for teachers. You can do it on the pre-service level in the methods courses, or on the in-service level through professional development. It's really hard to do it in methods courses because they're jam-packed. For example, in our math methods course here at UA, it's a one-semester course if you're in elementary education, and basically you have to learn in that one semester how to teach math from K to 5. Like, that's a huge range to teach. So they don't have a lot of room in that curriculum to add something on game-based learning. So I target in-service teachers. And I made sure I designed my professional development on how to integrate games on these four things. Make sure it's sustained intensive, focus on a specific academic content area, obviously mathematics, make sure it's active, and make sure there's coherence between the training and daily activities of the teacher. And so with that, I came up with the Integrating Game-Based Learning Initiative. And this is a year-long commitment from teachers. They have to attend 4 sessions throughout the school year. We all focus on one content area, which is, of course, mathematics, and it has a comprehensive curriculum. We look at COTS, or commercial off-the-shelf games. We look as teachers, game designers, and then learner as game designers as well. And then we also provide classroom coaching, observation, and software for teachers to use to do this. And so this just comes down to the fact that the reason why there's not a lot of professional learning is on digital game-based learning is because there's not a lot of guidance on how to do that. So what I taught in this was what Josh mentioned earlier, which is PCARD. It's a model of instructor developed by my colleagues, Arudis Foster and Mamta Shah there at Drexel University, and it's a way of integrating games in the classroom. The first stage of it is the play stage, and where students are immersed in natural play. And then next is a curricular activity where students engage in a problem solving activity, and you choose some sort of activity that bridges the students' gameplay and to what you want them to learn. Then there's a reflection activity where you have the students reflect on what they learned and make the connections between the game they played and the problem solving activity that they took part in. And finally, you bridge all three of the first three levels of this model together in a classroom discussion where you make sure that students are able to explicitly state what it is what they learned, and that's PCARD. So I implemented PCARD with three teachers, middle school math teachers, and I asked these questions here to guide the study. And these are three teachers that participated in my professional development series. And here's what I found is there's some themes that came out. One was that there was an initial lack of confidence in their ability to teach. One teacher said it felt like I was back again as a first teacher, first day of school teacher, learning how to do this. But then as they went on, they were like, "Oh, I'm kind of getting it. I can." They could see their confidence growing. The second was they were using PCARD, but they realized they needed to make tweaks to it, and that was great because teachers still should be able to, put themselves in whatever model that they use, and they know their classrooms well enough to adjust. The teacher said they had difficulty with the reflection stage, and that was really based on time management. But they saw the importance of having students reflect on their learning. They also talked about the importance of game analysis. So this is something that I think is a great takeaway. If you're going to use a game in your classroom, you need to have played the game from top to bottom, or from where you want your students to get to, so that you can know where all those teachable moments are in the game. That's huge, and that's what they found as well. And then the other thing, we had teachers were teaching with the game. That means that the game became a part of the lesson. It wasn't something that was outside the lesson as well. The teachers reported high engagement, and they said the students that benefited the most were the traditional low performing students in their classrooms. They felt that they did the best. All right, I'm going to pass the baton back over to Josh at this point. He's going to talk a little bit about Prodigy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andre. Really love the insights from both you and Chloe. Yeah, let's talk about Prodigy. So a very quick poll here. What is your level of familiarity with Prodigy Math? It'd be good to get a sense of the mix. Again, I'll give about 15 seconds just to see, where we're at. It looks like many people here so far are not familiar at all, more than half, which is exciting. Looking forward to chatting about it with you. We do have some who are somewhat and very familiar, so a good mix. All right. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. So our mission at Prodigy, as I said before, is to help every student in the world love learning, and digital games are our catalyst to make that happen. So as we developed the game, we spent lots of time in classrooms with educators trying to understand some of their biggest problems and figuring out what we could solve, or at least help solve. First was engaging math practice, so we know worksheets just were not working. Second is effective differentiation. It's really hard to help every student learn what they need to learn at their level. Third is saving time. We know how busy you are, and that's a key component. And last is budget friendly. We know that in many cases, there is no classroom budget. So trying to find something that could meet not just one, but all of these four buckets. And so again, challenge number one, students need to be engaged in math practice. So I want you to think about how many students in your classroom feel like this poor guy when it's time to do math practice. Certainly there's a certain percent that love it, but some that just do not like doing so. And I'm going to show you the student experience now. We've got a really quick video that I'll kind of talk you through, because a lot of times we hear people want to know what the student experience looks like. So let's see if that video is queuing up. There we go. Okay, so here's the Prodigy student experience. And as they log in, you're going to see they are first going to start by choosing their characters, hairstyle, hair color, eye color, skin color, highly customizable. And then they're dropped into this immersive world where they engage in math battles with creatures from this imaginary world. What they do is they cast spells, but in order to get the power to cast spells, they need to do math. And here's an example of a fractions question. We've got a video lesson available for students. They can fast forward, they can rewind it. We've got hints embedded in there. We've got manipulatives, counters, coins, base 10 blocks. In this question, we've got fraction strips. They cast their spell. If they get their question correct, they get that energy. They can then use to cast a spell or rescue a pet and have that pet join their team. And it's really this blend of a game that students really love with standards aligned math that gets them excited and has brought us to where we are today. And so we've heard from a lot of teachers saying things like this, that whether your students are nervous about math or they're comfortable with it or if they hate it, you're going to see an improvement in engagement, motivation, and ability when you implement Prodigy into your math program. I mean, we've got Chloe here with us. Chloe, what has it been like for you in your classroom?
It's been awesome. I mean, I've observed so many students that like enjoy it, enjoy playing the game, enjoy learning, and they get to do it at their level. So that makes them like even more excited. It's truly an awesome thing to watch.
Awesome. Thank you, Chloe.
I saw Prodigy as a great way to get my own kids, into math.
And my kids fell in love with the characters and the pets.
I've had handfuls of kids who want to do it at home, and they come back to school and they're so excited about the stuff that they learned and who they beat, of course. Of course.
I don't even think they realize they're learning, so I think that's the best part of it.
They love playing it. They love finding their friends.
The kids at our school were like, you guys got to check this out. It's like pretty great.
What's better than games and children mix it all together? You have a happy child.
Okay, the second challenge was that teachers need to cover a lot of content in a short amount of time. They've got to deliver it to students' academic levels. So there's a couple of pieces here. One is standards alignment, which I talked about earlier. We've got a team of educators just like me who take state standards, literally state by state, break them down, take the standards, break them into skills, and then take those skills and have them range in difficulty, right? And so when they show up in the game, they're now in our adaptive algorithm. So let's say a student approaches a skill as they're playing. Doesn't really matter which one. I have an example here. Let's say they really do well. They answer a whole string of questions correctly on that topic. The algorithm is then going to know they're ready to move on to post-requisite and harder skills. Let's say another student hits that skill and struggles. They do really poorly. It'll bump them back to prerequisite skills so that they can get that practice they need to come back to that grade level skill and get ready to master it. So that adaptive piece is huge. The third element is saving time. We know that time is really a precious commodity for educators. And there's really three pieces here that I want to cover. First is that you can align the in-game math content with what you're teaching. So if you are teaching 2D shapes, the students can play the game and see content on 2D shapes in Prodigy. Second is assessing your students as they play and practice math. We'll cover more about that in a minute. And third is saving time by getting insights with automatic grading, which Chloe previously talked about, and I'll cover that a little more in depth. Here's what I'm talking about when it comes to aligning the content you're teaching to with what students see in the game. So you've got the skills here associated with 2D shapes in third grade in California Common Core. You can choose one of these skills. You can choose a few of these skills. It's up to you. You can assign them to one student, 5 students, or the whole class. It's also up to you. And then you're going to get the results in real time. This is one of my favorite parts. Each little box you see here is a question that a student has answered. So you can see that students A, B, and C are struggling. And as you said, hey, 15 minutes, go play. You're then monitoring this at your desk. You can see student A, B, and C need help, pull them over and give them some reinforcement before they continue on. And this is a testimonial from another teacher who has said it's really easy to go in and find the content that you're teaching and align it into the game. Now, challenge number 4 is classroom budgets are severely stretched. That's why Prodigy is completely free for educators. Nothing is locked for them. That includes the reporting, the grading, the alignment of content, it's all no cost. We're able to do this for you because of optional parent memberships. Parents can upgrade to get additional educational insights and unlock additional in-game content. That means the whole thing is free for educators and schools. Students can play. They all have access to the game. They get all the educational in-game content. And that's because we wanted to have nearly no barriers, really no barriers to get students in and allow them to play. So last year, over 900,000 teachers used Prodigy's games completely free last year. Sorry, nearly 900,000. And I love this. Over 50 million students played Prodigy completely free last year. So we're really, really proud of that. And here are teachers saying how it's worked for them. They don't have to worry about whether the district is going to pay for it or not. It's going to be available for them at no cost. Keep in mind, Prodigy is certified by iKeepSafe for FERPA and CSPC and COPPA. And you can get registered at prodigygame.com. And with that, we will shift into our question and answer segment. I know I've been seeing questions come in. We'll stay here for an additional 5 minutes to cover these so that we can make sure we get to as many as we can. Let's start with this one. I work with some teachers who get nervous about getting started with digital games. What would you recommend I do to help them get started? Andre, what would you say to that?
I think it would be wise to a couple ways to go about it. See if your district has PD. See if there are other teachers that are using it in your school, or see if there are teachers using it in your district, and then see if you could just get some best practices. The other thing is to actually start playing games. Like go and find educational games and actually play it. I find it very hard for you to see how you could possibly integrate games in the classroom if you're not a game player yourself. So go. I know I frequently visit the Apple. I don't have a Google device, so I use the Apple Store, and I go and look and see their games. I run searches on a regular basis to find games to play and to see. So that would be how I would start, and then I would start looking to see if there were resources that went along with those games in terms of lesson plans that already exist, and see if and then use those as a way for you to start getting into this.
Awesome. Thank you, Andre. Chloe, got a question here for you. What would you say the ideal amount of time students should play a game for in any given week?
That's a good question. I think it would depend on what they're playing. Like I believe it was you who mentioned a lot of websites will tell you how many minutes they think are good for them to like actually have the students learning. In my class, we do have the 20-minute center rotation. So they play 20 minutes a day, Monday through Thursday, and then Fridays also. So I would say that's probably a good amount. You don't want them to be sitting at the screen and just little zombies either, but I would say about 20 minutes a day, again, depending on what game that you're using for them.
Awesome. Thanks, Chloe. I see one that's here for me. How do you make money if everything is free? Again, it's the optional parent membership. So 97% of people who play Prodigy never pay us a penny. 3% of parents purchase the optional membership, and that's what powers our entire company. And that's why we can provide what we do for free. I think we've got time for one last question. Let's see. Andre, this one's for you. How do you suggest getting the parents on board to work on digital game-based learning at home?
That's a great one. I saw that. I was hoping you picked that one. I think it's being strategic, and it depends on the grade level. I know, for example, I have a toddler, and like, for example, we always have this first, it's like a welcome back open house kind of event. And I think that would be a great way to show parents, hey, this is what we're doing in class, and have like a station or something set up for parents to play. Parent teacher conferences are a great way to do that as well, where you can do that if you're however your school has it set up. I think another great way would be to create some sort of screencast YouTube video that you post up and that you can share with parents to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Hey, it works, and here's why we're doing it. And hey, why don't you try it too, or why don't you play along with your child? And then finally, if you're sending it home where they're playing the game at home, have part of the assignment is that the parent has to play with the child as part of the assignment, or something along with the assignment. I think that would be a great way to get parent buy-in.
I love that. Great response. Chloe, before we wrap, anything you want to add to that?
No, I actually do all those things. So we have open house on it. It's coming up, and I always make sure I have a login sheet that goes home with the kids for all of the digital game base that we use in class. So like the parents aren't messaging me like, oh, they're talking about this some game. What is it? How do they get in? So I put the website, their username, their password, and I make an extra copy because children lose things. So I send one home and then I keep one for when their parents are like, I can't find it. I'm like, okay, I'll just send it over. I think that's definitely helped because having a paper with all the websites and all the information, you're making it simple. So they don't have to like go and find these things themselves. It's already there for them. And I think that really does help parents that might not have a ton of time to do the research and find these games still be able to get their students on it.
Amazing. Thank you once again, Andre and Chloe, for being here. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us and spent this hour with us. We so appreciate it. Thank you for all the questions. We're excited for the future of digital game-based learning. It's really bright. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Take care, everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye.